Muscle cars, they're not just for wife-swapping plumbing contractors from the upper Midwest. Today, it's the 5 muscle cars you need to buy today, even if you don't have a mustache like John Bolton. We've got Mike Musto from the drive show Big Muscle coming up right now. That's today on After Drive. So you want to buy a muscle car, but you don't have $2 million for a Hemi Cudas, you can still get a piece of tire-smoking Americana for regular guy money. Mike Musto is the host of Big Muscle on Drive, and Mike is with us right now. Mike, good to see you, sir.
How are you?
Good, good. We were just on After Drive together last week from Los Angeles.
We were indeed, and now we're in New York.
That was fun.
And it's
Now we're in New
cold.
York. And it's freaking cold
Yeah,
here.
it snowed this morning.
Yeah, it's
Not a fan.
ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We have terrible climate here. And you were from here and you moved to
Oh
California.
yeah, dude. I grew up in the city, so moving to the West Coast now and not having anything under 60 degrees for the last 2 years of my life has been glorious.
Right.
So now waking up to snow is just not
It
okay.
sucks. Yeah. So Big Muscle. So you are, if people don't know, you are on a show that's run seasonally. So you are opposite Tunes. So
Absolutely.
when Tunes on, you're not on.
Right.
And
we're on Tunes now.
Well, you're on Tunes not on. Exactly.
Yeah, that's easy.
And it's about muscle cars. So what's the show
I
about?
mean, we generally look at everything that was, basically Americana from, say, 1987 back. Muscle cars, hot rods, things of that nature. So it doesn't it's not muscle car specific. We get a lot of comments like that. Well, that's not a muscle car. Well, the show is not called Muscle Car.
Well, I can't, that's the orthodoxy, right? And so that's not what we're talking about there. We're sort of blowing the orthodoxy away.
Man.
We don't want, it's like, we're going to talk about muscle cars in terms of, American muscle as we see it as the sort of blanket term for everything.
But that encompasses hot rods and things of that nature, and muscle cars,
Pony
and
cars.
pony cars, and pro touring cars, and dragsters and everything else you can think of.
Right, the whole thing. Yeah. So all together, and not just because everybody tends to like to get to kind of separate and fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's something from your show that you remember as being like the coolest thing to do, or the best show you did?
I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of overwhelmed at the submissions we get, because we get submissions every month, and by submissions I mean like anywhere from like 300 to 500 via email. And some of the cars are they're off the charts. I mean, we have guys. I have a 2,000 horsepower something or other. Come and film this. I've got something with 3 engines. I've got something that blows flames, and you're just like, oh my God. And never in a million years did we think we were going to get that kind of response.
Yeah.
But it's been great. Like, we had a guy that we filmed, I think it was second season, with a 1,200 horsepower Chevy Nova.
That thing was insane.
It was outstanding, And then you go, like, not only was the guy great, but then you go back to his house, and in his living room, he's got a Yanko Camaro with like a 1/4 inch of rubber baked onto the quarter panel. It was in his house, and you're like,
that's an extremely rare car if you're not up on
it's
your
big money.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that is sort of interesting about the muscle car world, is that all this weird stuff happens. So that was a dealer that found a way to go to the ordering sheet that GM provided and order like the biggest engine that they could in the
Camaro, and then just boosted it up with dealer mods, and that was it.
And put their own dealer name on it, Yanko, from Pennsylvania, I think, right?
And now it's one of the most desirable cars on the planet.
Yeah. And it's worth about $500,000.
They're worth big money.
Yeah. But you don't have to pay that kind of money to get into the muscle car thing.
No, I mean, and that's the whole thing. People think that you've got to spend like $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000. That's so not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because we're both from New York metro area, right? We're both around the same age, and we sort of both came up in the time when you could get like V8 muscle cars for nothing.
Like in the 80s, you could have bought like 440 Cudas for like $6,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Cars
and that was a lot.
And that was a big number back in the day, right? But now those cars, they're untouchable for under 40. Okay?
Right.
But there are still a lot of cars, and cars from like when we were in high school that are around that are coming
That's true.
back.
So we're getting around the nostalgia age a little bit.
Dude.
But
I hate to say that.
Yeah, I hate to say it too. But I mean, I had a Buick that cost $500 and had a GM small block in it. And it turned out to be like a Camaro killer.
Right, exactly.
I mean, and it took like nothing. It took like a few little tweaks, new carb, rear, and it,
Well, that's what people forget. It's like these cars, they're so simple.
Yeah.
They're so simple. They don't have computers. You've got They're carbureted. They're just easy machines. And so if they don't start, like I remember I used to have an old Capri. Like if it didn't start, you'd pop the hood and you'd be like, oh, that fell off.
Yeah, fell off.
You know what I mean? And you put it back on, you're like, oh, it's probably
Staple
trouble.
it on,
and it worked.
Yeah.
And they were just so simple.
Yeah.
And they're easy to work on, and you really don't have to be that mechanically inclined to figure these things out, which is a great thing.
And it's really funny because we were with Chris Harris in Los Angeles, right? And I've never seen, Chris came from the, European car BMW school growing up.
I mean,
he fell in love with your Charger in a way that I've never seen a man
I was
fall
kind of
in love with a
surprised
car.
because, you're talking about a guy that runs, F40s and F50s on the racetrack. He drove the Delta Wing. He drives cars that I look at and I'm like, oh, they're Halo cars. They're the cars that I'm lusting after.
Yeah.
And he sees this 40-year-old Dodge and he's just like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's really funny. I mean, honestly, I think that if you don't like muscle cars, that's fine, but you're kind of missing the point. There's something to, of course, most of the time you're not going to go around, a racetrack, a road course quicker than, like maybe a BMW or something, or a Porsche or something. But you actually have done some stuff to your car to make it handle.
I've modified my cars because when I first got into it, that's what I had.
Yeah.
And I come from I used to race motorcycles, so it was one of those things when I got the muscle cars and I still wanted to go racing. So what do you run what you have, right? So you do a little suspension mod here and a little thing here, and all of a sudden I built this car up and I was like, well, this doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Right? The other thing is, I think muscle cars and just old American cars in general bring something to the table that, they bring style, they bring the kind of this American kind of power to the public, and they've got an aura about them.
Yeah.
That all the cars don't.
Well, it's true. I mean, it's sort of like, that whole garage thing, just sort of going in your garage and coming out with 400 horsepower or something.
Yeah.
But so the thing that we've been looking at lately is that muscle cars have been appreciating in value a lot. But it's the ones that, like the Hemi Cudas, like the ones that, people who grew up during those eras are really nostalgic over, and they're paying a lot of money for the rarest ones.
Right. I remember back there was 06 when Barrett Jackson first came out.
Yes.
And the market just exploded.
Right.
And people were paying $2 million for a Cuda, and you want to smack them and be like, dude, it says Plymouth on it, man. What are you doing?
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Like to go up against the Duesenberg that was hand-built, coach-built car from the 20s. Yeah. It's just like something off the line in Detroit. Going
and not to say they weren't nice cars, but it's a Plymouth, man. It's like...
Yeah. But if you want to get into it, you don't have to spend that kind of money. So we're that's kind of the thing.
Oh, right.
You can couple of things we're talking about today is the cars that you could get into that may not appreciate, but will be fun.
Sure.
And kind of, you can get a really good one for not a whole lot of money. Or the ones that are probably around the same price, but may appreciate and may become the cars in the future that are good investments.
And it goes in cycles, right? You've got the cars from the 60s that everybody thinks are untouchable, but there are models out there that are completely attainable for not that much money. And then you've got the 70s cars, and that's when kind of everything went down in power, and so people relied on stickers to go fast.
Right.
And then even the cars from when we were in high school, like the 80s, that's the stuff that I'm looking at now, even though I have a 60s cars, that I'm like, oh, I really want to get some of those back.
And some of those are really starting to appreciate too.
Oh yeah, big time.
But so a couple that won't cost you a whole lot and may not appreciate, but okay, so the Mustang's gone up a lot in value. What about the Mercury Cougar?
Cougar, I'll tell you, the Cougars are, we get a lot of requests for those.
Yeah, they're really good looking too.
It's a good looking car, and the Cougar was more of like an executive Mustang, right?
It's like your older brother's
Yeah,
Mustang.
it's like the interiors were nicer, they had beautiful styling to them, and they were pretty good. If you got like an XR7 back in the day or like an Eliminator, those were great cars, but they just don't have the following that the Mustangs do or that the Cudas do. And, and it's not to say they weren't great cars, they were fabulous. It's just didn't have the following.
So you can get one, between 5 and 10 grand.
Well, yeah,
maybe 5 is probably
I would say you could still get a really nice Cougar for between say 9 and 15 grand. That's a car, and that's a really nice car. That's something turnkey driver enjoy and have a lot of fun in.
Yeah. What else? We got the other thing is like same kind of thing where it's the pony cars are expensive. The Camaros and Mustangs are the things that everybody wants. AMC, right? So there's the AMX, but what about a regular Jaguar?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look back at AMC, they were always like Mopar and Dodge. They were always kind of like the redheaded stepchild.
Yeah.
AMC was like, nobody wanted to talk about them. Like, they were there, but they never really came into their own. But you could get like a Rebel SST, you could get a Javelin, you could get, I mean, cars like the Rebel Machine, those are still, those are up there if you could find them, or the Scrambler or something like that. But they made some fabulous cars, and even stuff like the Matador, which is one of the ugliest cars ever.
It is, yeah.
Like, if you're creative, you can make these things look really, really good.
It's true.
You know,
and if you watch Adam 12 or like 70s TV from
what was the James Bond movie with the Matador with the wings?
It was which one? Man with the Golden Gun.
Yes, that is it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Travis Okulski from Jalopnik. The Man with the Golden Gun. Right, exactly. That had that crazy Matador.
Yeah.
And then they did the Pacer and they did all that wacky crap. But a Javelin is like a pony car you can get, and you know they were raced.
And Javelins are great looking cars. A lot of people don't realize that, but if you get a chance, go and look at them and look at the kind of the flared haunched fenders in the front. How there's like a little ducktail spoiler built into the roof line. They're sexy cars, man. And the cockpit is like, it's almost like an aircraft style cockpit that comes out and faces the driver.
Yeah.
Nobody buys these cars, and they're out there, and I don't know why. I think they're gorgeous.
I know, I do too, and there are deals on them. I mean, if you want to get into a car that you just want to drive the wheels off of, that's definitely one of them. And actually, you drove one that had been set up for racing for Big Muscle, right?
AMX was a short kind of two-door, and AMC didn't really know what it was. They didn't know if it was a sports car, if it was a GT car, but the one we drove was unbelievable.
Right. The other one, I mean, like the sort of personal luxury cars, like the mid
I would say 60
period Grand Prix.
69 to 72.
Yes.
These were cars. I actually had one. I had a 69 Grand Prix SJ. That was awesome. It was like gold with gold leather interior. It had an 8-track player in the back, and that had a 428 in it. And that thing was a stump puller.
Yeah.
Those are cars that you can. The nicest one you could probably get for 15 or 16 grand, and that's like the nicest one in the United States. Those are cars that are unbelievable on the highway.
Yeah.
They handle great. They're just fabulous cars.
Yeah.
But the audience isn't out there. But if you want a big power car, don't give me any excuses, because you could totally go out and buy one because they're totally out there.
Yeah. Also, we were talking a little bit, I didn't put it on the list, but Ford Maverick, right? It's not as good looking.
Oh, yeah, the Maverick and like the Comet.
Yeah, the Mercury Comet.
Those are, a lot of people discount kind of the budget, quote unquote, muscle cars, right? So they'll look at like Darts, Dodge Dart, and they'll be like, I'm not buying that. I'll look at the Maverick, or look at a Comet or something like that.
Right.
These are great starter platforms. They're short wheelbase cars. They can be set up to handle really well. They don't have all the accoutrements that high-end luxury cars have, but they still had AC. You know what I mean? They still had heat, which is a nice thing. And they're not bad looking. Like I said, they have to be massaged a little bit. So when you go into it, you have to have a little bit of a vision and say, okay, I'm going to make this car into my own personal thing, kind of like a Harley Davidson, right? There's not no two alike.
Yeah.
And the same thing kind of equates to
And you can
cars.
find ones that people have already done that with, right? So you can find, Mavericks forever. And the thing I like about the Maverick is you find an early one, like 70 or 71. Like, some of them really do look like an Aston Martin Vantage. Like,
well,
that
I
era.
think it was the Grabber.
The Grabber,
GT or something like that, and it had these twin little hood scoops in the front. They were styled back then, and they did it right.
Yeah.
But some people just don't want to be like, yeah, I have a Maverick. I mean, some people just don't want to say it.
Right, yeah, it's not a lot of bragging rights.
Yeah.
All right, so the other thing we were talking about is cars that, four-doors.
Oh,
also,
dude.
if you want a performance muscle car.
Why wouldn't you get a four-door? I mean, I know everybody likes the coupes, but you can go out and you can get Malibus, you can get Tempests, you can get Grand Prix and four-doors. And these are cars that they just don't have a following, and they're great. You can take people in them, they're comfortable. You can still get every bolt-on part that you can for the two-doors.
Sure.
And it's such a cheap way to get into the hobby. And again, you can make it into anything you want.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's not going to look like a GTO. It's going to look like, the car that, from Bewitched.
Pretty much. Darren
Sabrina drove. Well, wait, didn't Darren drive like a Camaro or something? Yeah, no, wait a minute. Bewitched was the show.
They don't even know what Bewitched is. They're going to look at us and be like, how freaking old if Zach was here, he'd be like, it's black and white.
That was like the Big Muscle episode you guys did where you drove your wagon and Zach didn't know who All in the Family.
No, I think I referenced All in the Family, like Sanford and Son. He's like,
He's like, I don't know what that is.
No.
Also, the other thing is cars that are often cloned to make look like this Tempest is made to look like a GTO.
The Le Mans, you know what I mean? A Sebring, looking like a GTX or a Roadrunner. Why?
So you get a good deal on a car that looks like the one.
Yeah.
And who cares, right? At that point, it's not like
It makes
there's a
no
lot
difference.
of bragging rights.
It makes no difference, and you can still put all the same bolt-on parts still go in there.
And the difference can be tens of thousands of dollars.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily tens of thousands.
All right, so those are the, that's like the kind of getting started list.
Yeah.
Right? All right, but here's the list, the big list.
Which
Here's the
list was
top
that?
5 list. All right, so so these are the cars. Now we've gone right up to the 80s
Yeah.
with these, and back to like the early 60s, I guess.
Yeah, well, these are cars that, and we get a lot of emails about this of what car would you buy if you could buy something today?
Right.
Right? Like what cars do you think are going to appreciate or that have started to appreciate, but you can still get your hands on them?
Right.
So, and there are a bunch. You want me to just list them off?
Let's start with the first one.
All right.
One on top of the list.
All right, so one of my favorite cars that I will own, 1988 to 93, 5-liter Mustang notchback.
Notchback.
Notchback. Not the fastback, notchback. Now, these are the cars that if you were smart back in the 80s, this is the one you wanted.
Yeah.
Because it was lighter than the GT. It didn't have, you could order it just as a stripper car.
Yep.
If anyone has one, email me at drivebigmuscle@gmail.com because I really want one. But finding a stock one is almost impossible.
It's amazing because back in that day,
Yeah.
right? So like late 80s, early
Yeah.
90s, the GT, top of the line GT was like 17.5,
Right.
18 grand.
Right.
The notchback that was faster, to some
12 grand?
people, 12 grand. Right. It was
Yeah.
a lot. It was a big difference.
Yeah.
That you could still buy a car that didn't have like the flash of it, but had the engine. It
That's
had the
right.
5-liter. It
That's
had
right.
the same engine.
Right.
It's not like Ford was making a bunch of engines like they were in the 60s then.
No, I mean, and the thing is, and we should kind of quantify that these weren't overly fast cars, but for back in the 80s,
Yeah.
they were. And to this day, I think the 5-liter, the 5-liter Mustang from the 80s to 93, the Fox bodies, are still some of the most modified cars in the world.
Yeah.
They made millions of them, and people are still after them.
And I think the notchback is going to be the sought after
Oh,
one
dude, that's
going
the
forward.
one.
More than the GT, I think.
GTs, they made 1 billion GTs.
Yep.
Nobody really cares. The notchback, the stripper cars, those are the ones you want to buy.
Right. So you want to go a little, you say 88 to 93,
Yeah.
that's the sort of updated
Yeah, that
same
was kind of the last,
generation.
93 was the last year of the Fox body.
Yeah.
That's kind of, like I said, that's kind of our era of the Mustangs. When the new body style came out in 94, everybody was like, eh. It kind of looked like a turtle. Nobody really cared. And I don't think anybody still cares about them.
Right.
So, and the Fox bodies have kind of a mystique about them. They just do. And they're still being built up today, and they're still being showed today. And
Yeah.
they're just really cool. So that's absolutely my number one pick.
All right, so that's number one pick. If you could find a good one. Oh, by the way, also, a cool thing to do would be to try to find one of those old, the police ones, like the state trooper
They came up for
Mustang.
Yeah, they come up for auction every now and then. And
Yeah.
they come up on eBay and like bring a trailer and stuff like that. They
Yep.
pop up. And those are cool, man.
Yeah, those are really cool. I remember they were going for $5 or $6 grand years
yeah.
ago, but they're probably more
And
than
they're
that now.
bulletproof. Motors and transmissions are great.
Yeah.
They don't die.
Okay, so 77 to 81 Trans Am.
Okay, now this is more of kind of a personal thing, but I still think they're fantastic investments. I mean, if you were a kid in the late 70s, you obviously saw Smokey and the Bandit. Again, Ian's gonna look at me and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's black and white. You know what Smokey and the Bandit is? All right. I totally think you're lying to me, but whatever. But the early Trans Ams, so like, 70 through say 74, like the Super Duties and things like that,
Yeah.
they're stratosphere prices.
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now. The bullnose Trans Ams and things like that. You start getting into 76, 77, 78, okay? They weren't that fast, but they were great looking automobiles.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those things, like if you look at what a 77 or late 70s Trans Am looks like, all black, honeycomb wheels, big screaming chicken on the hood.
Right.
It's like they gave the designers like an 8-ball of Coke and told them to go into the back room and just go nuts. And they came out and they were
Exactly.
like, this is for you.
Right.
But they're still cheap. You can still get a great one for 12 to 15 grand.
I mean, like the best ones are 20.
Absolutely.
Like the best, like almost brand new smelling inside
Yeah.
are like 20 grand.
Yeah, and if you get the WS6 package, they're actually phenomenal handling cars too.
That's true. I mean, a lot of people don't know that specifically. I mean, they think that all of that era Camaro and Trans Am were bad
Those
handling
cars went around a corner and they did it
Yeah.
really, really well.
They weren't bad.
No, and they're also outstanding platforms if you want to do like an LS swap or something like that.
Right. And it's sort of weird because then if you start looking at them, there are things you have to look out for, which between 77 and 81, the
Yeah.
engine choices are a
Engine
little
choices,
bit spotty,
They
right?
swapped the front end over. Remember now, 81 and I think it was 79 to 81 had the 4 lights in the front, where the
Right.
other ones kind of had the.
And and then they started out with Pontiac because every division of GM used to make their own engines.
Exactly.
And so Pontiac used to make the 400 that by then was pretty good,
Yeah.
and then they got rid of that and ended up using like an Oldsmobile engine. It was
Yeah.
an Oldsmobile 403.
Yeah, and then they even had they had the Turbo Trans Am, which was like a 301 cubic inch.
Yeah, that was a
with
terrible car.
6 they called it the Turbo Turkey because it was just really slow.
But if you could find one of those and you don't mind going really slow in it,
Well,
it's
they-
probably going to
they-
be worth a lot.
They were still good driving cars.
Maybe.
That's what people think. They think that, I mean, you got to remember, they made nothing in the way of horsepower, but they still made 300 pound-feet of torque,
It's very true,
330
yeah.
pound-feet of torque.
Yep.
So they'll get you going. They're just not going to really keep you going. That's basically
That's right. It
what
may
comes down to.
peter out at some point. All right, so we're going to go back a little bit for this
Yeah.
one. But this is one of my favorite cars, and they still
totally
haven't
agree.
appreciated
Yep.
to a degree that make them out of the range.
Right.
67 to 69 Plymouth Barracuda.
Unbelievable cars.
Fantastic.
Short, A-body style cars. And you could get them in the fastback, or you could get like a Formula S in a fastback, or you could get the notchback. These are the Mustang GTs of the late 80s, or
Yeah.
the Mustang LXs of the late 80s.
Of the
Yeah.
late 60s of that. Yeah, right.
And they're just, stop and look at these cars. You know what I mean? Like, pull up a picture on the internet and just type in, 68 Barracuda notchback. This is a slick looking car,
Yeah, I
man.
know. Those were great, and they were like the perfect size because, a lot of those cars of that era are really, really, really big.
Yeah.
Like you look at your Charger, and that's a big car.
Charger's 18 feet long.
Yeah.
It's a big old sled.
But you put a Barracuda next to it, and it's probably
It's
at least a foot
a foot shorter, and it's a little narrower. But the cool part also was that those cars were decked out. They had beautiful dashboards. They had really nice center consoles.
Yeah.
Nice door panels. These were nice looking cars.
Yeah.
And again, you could 15 grand all day long
day
will
long.
get you a stunner.
10 to 12, and you've got a decent
You've got
car.
a decent car. You want to spend like 8 grand, you get a runner
Right.
that you got to put money into. But who cares, man? Build it up and make it what you want.
Yeah, or you spend 8 grand, you get a really good convertible with a slant 6 and just cruise around all day.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, people, and again, slant sixes, you're not going to qualify those as muscle cars.
Sorry, that's
But there's nothing to say why not buy one that's 8 grand with a slant 6, pull it out, and put a wicked small block in
True.
it. Put a big block, do whatever you want to it.
Or I was at a drag night once, and it was a slant 6 night, and there were guys that did like turbo slant 6s.
Yeah.
They were doing like 9 seconds.
You can beef those, and the slant 6.
Pretty amazing.
You were saying the slant 6 is going to run. I mean, they're just good
right.
bulletproof motors that are
Yeah.
that are really reliable. So.
Barracuda, what can I say? I mean, I happen to like
Totally agree.
the fastback. You're
Totally
a
agree.
notchback guy, but it's a fantastic car. Okay, so we're going to go to the car that first started the whole super chips, like chipping your car movement. Like
Okay.
It's the Buick Regal T-Type,
Yeah,
Grand
Grand
National,
National and GNX.
And GNX, right? So GNX, obviously the Halo.
GNX was last year, it was 87.
Yep.
And these are cars that, when you were in the 80s, I mean, you had the Mustangs and you had like the IROC Camaros and the Z28s and things like that. And then Buick went nuts. And they just said, okay, we're going to slap a turbo on this 3.8 liter V6, and we're just going to kick the crap out of everybody.
Yeah.
And when it came out, I remember my buddy Jimmy, his dad bought one. I think it was in '85. And at that time, I used to ride bikes, and I remember racing them, and I didn't win by a lot. And I was like, what is it?
Yeah.
And you start doing research on it, and even now, they're still really, really sought after.
Yeah.
But you could get a nice Grand National, 15 grand.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I mean, really nice. one.
Really nice.
I mean, they haven't gotten to the point where there's a run on them. There's no run on
Right.
them yet. I mean, they're getting there. I mean, they're more expensive
They're,
than they
they're
were.
moving up. GNXs, I think they only made about 500, and I think they made 509 or something, or 594, something along those lines. And those were trick cars, and
Yeah.
people don't realize how trick they were. I mean, they had different wheels, they had different suspensions, they had, the fender flares.
I mean, McLaren in Detroit made the motor.
Exactly.
It was
They had Stewart Warner gauges.
Stewart Warner. I mean, it was a really, really
Yeah.
serious car. It was doing 4.5 seconds to 60.
In '87.
In 87, when that was like 2 seconds faster than the Testarossa.
Yeah, you had like the cars
I
that
think
would
not 2
beat it
seconds,
back in
1
the
second.
day. It were like a 288 GTO,
Yeah.
an F40, right? A 959, and then you've got this black Buick that rolls. It didn't go around a corner for but
problem.
in a straight line, dude, it was fast.
Yeah.
And they're still really sinister looking.
Yeah. Well, Buick was interesting because they had that Indy thing. They were building they were building Indy engines. In '76, they had a pace car, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
With the Turbo 6 in it, and everybody was like, "Turbo 6?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
What are you, European?"
Yeah.
And
it
then
was
all of a
good.
sudden, it was good. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, it was the developed version of
Right.
that. But another thing, like sort of everybody from that era has like a Regal story. Like
Yeah.
I was in my friend's Trans Am, and these guys pulled up next to us, Central Avenue in Yonkers. I think I told this story once, but they were, these guys just killed us.
Yeah.
And we pull over to Nathan's parking lot, of course. And we get out, and we're like, "What the heck was that?" And that was a regular T-type. That
Right.
wasn't even a Grand National.
Right, yeah, you were telling me that.
And he was like, "Yeah, I got this this secret." I was like, "What? What's the secret?" He goes, "Yeah, it's something called Super Chips." I was like, "Super Chips?
that
What
was
the hell is that?"
The first Super Chip car.
It was the first Super Chip car. The dude who did Super Chips was the first car they did a chip for. 65 to 67 Nova. So you also had one of those in Big Wheels?
Yeah, we just filmed one.
Okay.
We filmed a 67 Nova wagon. It'll show next season.
Okay.
But that's it. It's great little cars.
So what's the deal with that? That was like the economy Chevy back in the day, but then they put the big motors in them.
Yeah.
That was basically that small car, big engine deal.
Yeah. I mean, and they're not that big. They don't get big money right now.
Yeah.
You can still find them, like, again, 10 to 15 grand for a really nice car, a really nice runner.
Yeah.
And they're good old cars. They really are, and they're underappreciated, but they're starting to climb. So, in 10 years, these are going to be $20,000 cars, $25,000 cars all day.
Yeah. So wrapping this up.
Yes.
I have to say, this last one is one of my favorites. Now we're talking about smaller muscle cars, basically all the ones you're talking about are kind of small. This is definitely the
and
other
I don't
end
know
of the
how many
spectrum.
people are going to agree with me on this, but I don't care.
I don't
because
care either.
I know I'm right.
Okay. Chrysler C-bodies.
Yeah.
Now those include the Sport Fury,
Yeah.
the Chrysler Newport.
Yeah.
What else?
Like the
Dodge-
LeBaron, stuff.
Yeah.
The C bodies are basically what were Chrysler's kind of big fuselage style bodies. They were massive,
Yeah.
massive. But they've got lines to those cars that are just fantastic. You could get them, you could get a host of different engines, but if you're going to get one with a 440, because anything less than that is not going to pull itself from the stoplight because they're just so big.
But they're really not that expensive. You can get one for almost nothing right now.
Unless you're talking about if you're like, I'm dying to find a 71 Sport Fury, 7140.
So
Those are starting to get money. And
Yeah.
by money I'm talking 18 to say 22, 23 grand.
but not 40 grand.
no,
like a lot
not
of
at
other
all.
muscle cars.
Like I
Yeah.
said, nicest one in the country, $25,000. There you go, it's for you.
Boom, done. Yeah.
And they're good looking cars.
And they're
man.
amazing, and they're really like a piece of that era. I don't think that you could show another car that says 1971
Oh, not even close. dude.
to a larger
And it's
degree
when-
than that
It's
car.
when America really made these big kind of land yachts. And I
Yeah.
think that was probably one of the biggest things on the road.
I mean, it's definitely one of the biggest two-doors you
Yeah.
could get back then. But it's also part of that personal luxury thing we were talking about with the Grand Prix before.
Oh, yeah.
That was a personal luxury car.
Oh, if you want to go from LA to San Francisco,
Yeah.
that's the car, man. You just
Absolutely.
sit back and float down the highway at 80, 90 miles an hour. They were fabulous.
And there was that Hearst edition, right? Wasn't that like
They made the 300 Hearst edition.
Yeah.
And that was really slick. That was white and gold. And it's interesting. It had a fiberglass trunk, a deck lid on it, and it had an integrated spoiler in it.
Yeah.
And it had a kind of a nice scoop on the hood. Those are tough to find.
Yeah.
But they're really cool.
And if you have a lot of money, those, even if you find one, if you can find one for sale, they're not going to be 100 grand.
They're never going to be 100 grand.
I don't know if they're never going to. I mean, I think if you hang on to it for a while, that's
Like
something. That's the one that's
175
gonna,
years because they're
175
they're going to take a long time because they're just not people. I think one is the size. I think it puts people off a little bit.
Right.
But if you do a little research on these cars and you see them when they're slightly modified, both with like a nice wheel and tire package and things of that nature, they're really aggressive looking and they're good looking car. And it's just, I don't know, I just dig them, man. I think they're definitely going to be $40,000 and $50,000 cars eventually.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, man, they're gorgeous.
Well, that's it. So go out and buy a muscle car just as soon as you can.
Yeah, buy them, man.
Yeah.
And then call me, and I'll put it on my show.
Absolutely. Mike Musto, good to see you, man.
Always a pleasure, bro.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming to the fake living room. You know,
Most comfortable
you're
fake
always
living
welcome.
room in New York.
I hope you're in New York eating a bunch of things that you
Meet my
can't get
wife
in
there.
California.
Yeah, well, that's everything.
Veal Parmesan. Well, that's
Right here, baby.
That's After Drive for today. /drive.tv, @drive on Twitter, facebook.com/drivetv. And don't forget, go to the Facebook discussion forum that we actually put up this question, and you guys are leaving a bunch of really good answers. So keep putting stuff up there,
Yeah.
and we're going to keep talking about when does your show come out again?
We'll be first quarter 2014. So
Yeah.
we're filming now, and we're still looking for cars. So
Yeah. So after the holidays, you're going to see Big Muscle.
you'll see Big Muscle back. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming on.
You got it, man.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.
Later. So I just flew 3,000 miles from California to New York to do a special episode of After Drive with Mike Spinelli. And then I got a little information that Spinelli decided to make a video on his own, completely separate from anything that you're going to see in the studio. He woke up one night and decided to get the bright idea that he was going to troll the Drive hosts. I really want to say I didn't like it, but I can't. And you guys are going to see it, and I can almost guarantee it's going to be the best 2.5 minutes of your day. Check it out.
Hey, YouTube, I just wanted to clear something up. You know all that bumbling I do? It's just an act. But these other guys I work with, let me tell you a couple of things about them that might surprise you. That Chris Harris, he's a nice kid, knows his way around a racetrack. We kind of look after him because he had a rough childhood. 3 words, Jim will fix it. Now every time he sees a man in his mid-50s with a blonde wig holding a penis in his hand, he freaks the f*** out. That Matt Farah, he ain't real. Jim Henson came up with him 20 years ago for a show that never got made. It's called Fat Sesame Street. He ended up in the back of a warehouse, and we found him by the side of the road holding a sign that said Chunkaluffagus. Now what about that Leo Parente? That guy's got 2 speeds, fast, and what the f*** was that? Funny story about that guy. His father was a cricket. His mother was a bottle of 5-hour energy drink. We just keep him around in case we want to burrow to the center of the earth in 5 minutes. And what can I say about Mike Musto? He's a nice guy. Big guy. Kind of menacing. But we found him after a botched operation. His name used to be Michelle. Black woman. Played center for the WNBA. But we nursed him back to health, and he seemed to like big muscles. So we said, hey, Michelle, go for it. I mean Mike. So that's the story. I hope you don't think any less of these guys, because they're good guys. Maybe they just need a little polish.